Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to rank the subclasses or hybrid studies for the Magus. There are 10 hybrid studies to rank. So before we begin, we have to talk about what a hybrid study gives you. Well, first of all, at level 1, you're going to get some sort of passive improvement. This is tied to a certain fighting style, usually, meaning weapon based, but not always. And usually there's something to do with Arcane Cascade. Well, there's always something to do with it, but usually something passive that happens while you're in Arcane Cascade. Not always. Then you get a Conflux spell at level 1 as well. This is a one action spell, so I'm just going to call it up front. They're all one action. Then you'll get a set of Studious spells. These will be added to your spellbook for free for you at levels 7, 11, and 13, along with a studio spell that comes from your class feature as well. But you'll get these added. Again, they're not prepared, they're just added to your spellbook. And finally, your choice will act as a prereq for feats at levels 4 and 10, with the exception of one of these hybrid studies that also gets feats at 6 and 8. Lots of feats for that one. Everything else, just getting 2 feats. So there you go. One last thing about the studious spells is, generally speaking, because we're getting them late, it's best to have studious spells that heighten up really well. And so you'll hear me call these sort of things out. If it does have a nice heighten, then it'll probably get a little better ranking for me because at level 7, getting a rank 2 spell added to your spellbook normally isn't that exciting, but it can be. And the final order of business before we actually jump in here is talking about how I'm going to be ranking them. And it is slightly different here because a lot of my ranking usually relies on, providing aid to your allies in a direct sense, right? It's a team-based game, but these are, generally speaking, very selfish subclasses. That's not a bad thing. That's just how they're designed. Because the class, you're still a spellcaster, you have plenty of ways to provide aid to your allies, do interesting things outside of just your spell strike. And this is really focused on how to spell strike differently or certain combat styles in spell striking. So my rankings are a little different here. First, we have S. This is a subclass that is clearly mechanically stronger for combat than other subclasses. The passive benefit, granted spells, and feats are all worth taking and using. The combat style setup of the subclass is strong when all the aspects are put together. Basically, it's just it feels like the right way or almost a default way. And generally, we don't see this, but it can come up. It just really does have to feel like better than all the other subclasses. Then we have an A. This is a subclass that will be strong in combat in any adventure. It makes use of what the subclass is given and has an effective combat style. The feats should be good enough that you would take them, if not immediately when they're offered. So maybe it's offered at level 4, but you would wait till level 6 or 8. That's fine, you still want it. B is a subclass that supports its combat style well, but it may not be the strongest combat style regardless, or the support just wouldn't be valuable in all campaigns. There is a chance that this subclass is very good in the right conditions, as well as just kind of average otherwise, or even somewhere maybe less so. It may also land here because the feats just aren't worth the investment, or it only becomes good if the feats are taken. C is a subclass that lands here. It's just not that strong in combat in any campaign, or at least no better than like base class without a subclass. It might not take advantage of the speciality of the class or the granted bonuses and feats for the subclass, or, the combat style that it's tied to just isn't very strong, and this doesn't really boost it in any meaningful way. D, you might just want to avoid the subclass. It may actually detract from the base class in some way, or at least bait you into a playstyle that's either not very much fun or very challenging and isn't as strong as it could otherwise be if you chose a different subclass that actually worked with the class. Now that we're all set up here, let's go ahead and dive in with Aloof Firmament. Yes, the combat style here is one-handed swords, very specifically swords, generally with a free hand, but not everything requires that. At level 1, you've got your bonus passive here. So you get the Catfall feat, but only granted its bonus when you're not wielding a shield and at most light armor. Like I said, the requirements get mixed here. It's a little weird. Catfall, of course, is fantastic. It's just a nice feat to have. So when you fall, you don't end up prone very much. You don't take damage very often. Catfall is really solid. And there's things that build off of you falling, and you're not going to want to fall prone. So it's actually really solid to have this here. I don't mind the restrictions, but it does mean that you're definitely forced into a deck setup or your AC is going to be absolutely abysmal. Nothing else requires you to have at most light armor in this entire subclass, so kind of a weird standout, but it's here. While in Arcane Cascade, you gain the benefits of the Quick Jump feat. Keep just adding feat stuff on here. Quick Jump, by the way, makes it a single action to take a long jump or a high jump. And your Fly, Leap, High Jump, Long Jump actions don't trigger reactive strikes. Also, when you take one of those actions that I just mentioned, the next strike you take that turn with a one-headed sword, leaving the other hand completely free, deals more Arcane Cascade force damage. Instead of being 1 at level 1, it'll be 4, it'll be 6 at level 7, and it'll be 8 at level 15. This is a pretty big damage increase, honestly. Given the suggested build of dex-based, one-handed sword wielders over strength-based, it really does help fill in that gap because you're going to have that reduced damage. Now that's if you follow everything here. The challenge is the requirement that you jumped, flew, or etc. Blah blah blah. In reality, with quick jump, it's really just not that hard to fill in a long jump where you might have had done a stride, and maybe you can fly later. So you do have to fit this stuff in though if you want to get that extra damage, and you might not want to do those things. It might not always make sense, but often enough, I think you'd be able to fit it in anyway, and you could still get from here to there with a jump rather than a straight stride if you needed to get the extra damage. I think it's easy enough to pull off that you will, but it's just not a natural thing, right? It'll feel unnatural saying, I'm going to long jump from here to that guy because I could stride, but I really want to get this bonus. It's just going to feel awkward. Then we have our Conflux spell, Sky Laughs at Waves. This requires wielding a one handed sword. That's the only restriction here. This lets you fly up to an enemy, then strike. But if you don't have a fly speed, you're going to fall after you make that strike. If you can't end your movement adjacent to an enemy, this is just straight up interrupted. I mean, don't use it if that's going to be the case. This is honestly really good for level 1. Flight is not easy to get at this point, so you're going to fall. But as a melee combatant, you're not struggling to hit those ranged creatures anymore, and that actually does make a big difference here. And you can just get up on top of higher places when attacking somebody. So you're being shot by an archer, you've got the distance to cover, you can fly right up to them. They don't have to worry about being in the air anymore. Great. This makes Catfall 100% necessary, though. Whether you take it yourself or you use it off of your passive, you really do need it. Because if you're going to fall, you can't afford to land prone and use an action to get up. So just keep that in mind. Understand how far you're falling. Also, it will trigger reactive strikes moving away from somebody using this. Just be aware of that. Then we have our studious spells here. At level 7, we get Water Walk. It's a utility spell, and it's fine to have if, you need it at the right time. So it's a good back pocket one. So I like getting those. But it's a little pointless at level 2 because it only affects one person. However, when you heighten to 4th rank, it allows the entire party to bypass underwater problems by letting them all water walk, and you get this at the point where you could heighten it to 4th rank. So it's a perfect fit for the level. I like that. Then we have Wall of Wind at level 11, and level 13 we get Variable Gravity. Wall of Wind is solid enough at level 3, but by this level, it's pretty easily outdone by the other walls you could have attained by this point, and Variable Gravity is just, it's not my favorite. I don't love it. As for the feats that are available to you at level 4, you have Distant Waterbird's Poise. It's a reaction after you hit with your spell strike. This lets you leap, high jump, or long jump out of danger after you spell strike, which don't trigger reactive strikes in this case. And you don't need to stride first if you're going to do a long jump or a high jump. After this, you can just land or walk on water until the end of your next turn, which is cool. Getting out after spell strike that's just a nice bonus, right? You want to get some distance away, especially if you've increased your movement speed at all. You can do that and make it really hard for enemies to follow up and attack you on their next turn. Using it as a reaction is fantastic. You can end your turn by doing this. Yeah, you won't have reactive strike available to you or whatever, but it's probably worth it if you got away. The fact that it's a jump doesn't feel overly important here. Again, it could have just been a stride, but that's fine. It's fine that it is a jump. It's not the end of the world since they're not making you do anything special to get that jump out of it. And being able to stand on water, yeah, pretty nice. So I actually do think this is a decent level 4 feat for you. I like that you can get out after a strike, especially considering you're just wearing light armor. And level 10, Unsheathing the Sword Light. This is 2 actions. You must have Spell Strike charged and wielding a one-handed sword. Again, no restrictions on holding anything else, just a one-handed sword, so whatever. Use Spell Strike using a spell slot this time. Then deal damage to all creatures in a 10-foot emanation equal to twice the level of the spell slot you used for the spell strike. And this will do the same type of damage as your sword and counts as cold iron and silver. So this is, straight up bonus on top of spell strike, which is nice. It also doesn't require you to use a damaging spell with your spell slot, just a spell using a spell slot. And by this level, you could be dealing 10 damage with that AoE, which isn't bad, right? That's fine. Is it blowing my mind? No. I mean, it's damage in a pretty small AoE that doesn't include your target, right? It doesn't include you, doesn't include the target, just includes everything else. So you may be hitting one creature, two if you're lucky. I mean, it's added damage, which is fine, but I don't know. I'm not ecstatic about this one. It's fine. Most of the individual pieces here are solid. We have a strange kind of anti-synergy. It pushes you to lean into dex, then requires you to have good athletics for a lot of the bonuses you want. Keep in mind all those things you're doing with high jumping, long jumping, all that stuff is athletics based, but you have to be dex based if you want to get the still have decent AC and get all your passives. Then we have the fact that some of what's granted is very strict, some of it's not strict at all. It doesn't feel well put together. So if you want to take advantage of everything, you need to go dex primary with a finesse sword and then leave your other hand open while boosting your strength as much as possible so you can get the most out of athletics while still having enough int to get the most out of your spell casting. The pieces, again, they come together. I think there's a good conflict spell here. I think you've got a good level 4 feat here. You get some good spells. Yeah, the level 10 feat, I don't really care. And the passives are kind of hit and miss. They're kind of strange. Overall, I think this is a B. I think if the level 10 feat was solid, or it was more internally consistent with the passives, a more coherent design, it could be an A. I think the pieces are here, they're just not put together quite right. So I'm giving it a B. I still think it lands just fine though. Next up, we have Inexorable Iron. The combat style here is using a big two-handed melee weapon. Passive bonus here. When you enter Arcane Cascade, or start a turn already in Arcane Cascade, you gain temporary hit points equal to half your level, minimum of 1. You must be wielding a melee weapon in 2 hands to get this. And assuming you jump into AC early on, this can be nice, constant form of temp HP. Is it a ton? No. But, the fact that it comes around every single round, you build it up round after round at level 1, even just 4 temporary hit points in a combat, that's going to feel okay. So I actually think it's pretty solid. It's nice, simple. You just have to be in Arcane Cascade, no other requirements, which I do like. Then we have our conflict spell, Thunderous Strike. This requires wielding a two-handed melee weapon. This lets you strike, then each creature in a 15-foot cone from you has to make a fortitude save against 2 sonic damage. On a crit fail, the creature also falls prone, and heighten +1. This adds another damage. Yeah, this is pretty weak. It's not the worst thing ever, but that cone of damage is very little with, just a small area. It's just also, if you're flanking with an ally, then you don't want to use this because you don't want them in the cone because it's going to hit them too, even though it won't hurt much because it's only 2 damage. But then why do you even care to really? It's just, I don't know. Yes, you're recharging your spell strike. It is some free damage along with that. But oh boy, am I just not excited about this one. Our Studia spells at level 7, we get Enlarge. This is great to cast at 4th rank because you get a bigger size improvement, damage improvement, reach. Honestly, it's a great spell to have on a melee martial if you're willing to throw it on yourself. Then we have Earthbind at level 11 and Planar Tether at level 13. Both of those spells are decent to get for free, and you might prepare them here and there, but I don't think you use them all the time. But they're both decent spells. Like I'm not upset to have either one in my spell book. The feats you have, you at level 4, Devastating Spell Strike. This is 2 actions. You must have Spell Strike charged. You're going to Spell Strike with a damage spell. Then it creates a 5-foot emanation of damage around the target, dealing 2 damage of the type from the spell, 3 at 9th, 4 at 14th level, and 5 at 19th level. You get to add in the bonus from Arcane Cascade on top of that as well. So, 1, 2, 3 as you go up. And yes, this is adding extra damage to Spell Strike, and it can just be done with a cantrip, right? It doesn't have to be done with a spell slot spell, it just has to be done with a damage spell, which is sometimes nice to have that flexibility. But honestly, this is just a worse version of the level 10 feat from Aloof Firmament, and I think you could skip this and never think about it again. And at level 10, we have Sustaining Steel. This is a free action after casting a spell from a spell slot. You regain hit points equal to the rank of the spell, or double if you're in Arcane Cascade. Get a chance to end any persistent void damage that's going on at the time. And if the spell had the Vitality or Void trait, then any persistent Vitality or Void damage that you have ends automatically, and you can change the damage type from Arcane Cascade to match either Vitality or Void as you wish, which is pretty cool. Keep in mind that when you spell strike, you do indeed cast a spell, right? So you can do this when you spell strike. That's actually pretty useful because that means every time you spell strike, you can heal up. The vitality and void aspects, they're riders. They might come in handy here or there if you're fighting undead or something. That's cool, but it's not why you care. You care for the healing. Between the healing, most if not all rounds, and then getting temp HP for being an arcane cascade, you can be kind of bulky like this. It's not bad. Unfortunately, I can't say that I like most of the pieces of this one. I like the bonuses to survivability you get, and the granted spells are decent, with one being a standout. The rest of this is just kind of weak, though. What really hurts is the poor conflux spell. It needs to be kind of the cornerstone of your playstyle, but yours is just kind of bad. And on top of that, you've got a bad level 4 feat. I just think early play, it's just not going to feel very good. And all you're getting out of it is some temp HP on top of the base class for the most part. Because of that, you're not going to feel like you have a subclass for the longest time. So I kind of have to say this lands at a C for me. And I like being a wielder of big two-handed weapons, but this just doesn't do it. That brings us to Laughing Shadow. This is for one-handed melee weapons, not just swords this time. While in Arcane Cascade, you gain a plus 5 foot status bonus to your speeds, or 10 feet if you're unarmored, if you strike an off guard creature while in Arcane Cascade and you have a one handed melee weapon equipped, and that is all you have equipped, right? You can't have anything else, then your bonus from Arcane Cascade instead of 1 starts at 3, then it goes to 5 at level 7 and 7 at level 15. I like the status bonus to speeds here more than anything else. I like it more than being able to jump and stuff like Aloof Firmament. I just like having a straight up speed boost. The unarmored plus 10 feet is crazy good, and I'd probably, once I could go with no armor because my dex was high enough, I'd just drop the armor and just go forget it. But the other option, of course, is it's requiring you to do a one handed weapon, and it sounds like you need a dex build, but you still get a plus 5 foot bonus even if you're wearing armor. So you could just go strength and keep medium armor, and you're still getting 5 foot speed bonus. You can still get extra damage when creatures are off guard while you're in Arcane Cascade. Honestly, this opens up more options for you. And if you do build for strength, that bonus damage from Arcane Cascade, adding on top of the bonus damage from having strength, you're going to hit pretty hard. So, yeah, you still have to get them off guard, of course, to get that damage, but it's nice. Then you've got your Conflux Spell, which is Dimensional Assault. You teleport up to half your speed, ending adjacent to an enemy, then make a melee strike. You cannot take another creature with you. If you heighten this to 5th rank, then it's your full speed. Of course, they auto heighten, so by level 9, this is your full speed teleporting. But suddenly, that status bonus to speeds we got from Arcane Cascade is pretty important. Being able to teleport and using a spell that doesn't have the manipulate trait means you won't trigger reactive strikes. But this isn't about safety, right? You're teleporting to attack. You're teleporting to go for the kill. What matters here is you can teleport generally into flanking position. If you teleport into flanking position and then attack, it means you're triggering your extra damage from Arcane Cascade, assuming you're in it. And yeah, I don't know. This is an easy way to move around, set yourself up for some strong attacks, get between places you normally wouldn't be able to. It gets even further as you get higher level. I like the way this one works. I like the way it scales. I think it plays into who you want to be as a damage melee caster really, really well. Then we have our studio spells. We have a level 7 Blur, level 11 Ghostly Weapon, and level 13 Translocate. Blur is a decent defensive buff, and Ghostly Weapon has potential uses. Translocate is a solid spell, though, assuming you need to get out immediately. The initial 120-foot range that you have is probably plenty for combat, but if you just need to get out of combat and just be like, no, I'm out, once this is upcast to 5th rank, which of course you already can by the time you get Translocate, yeah, you can just say, "No, I'm done. A mile away from here. I'm out." And sometimes that's the right call. I mean, you don't want to leave your party stranded, but if everybody else dies, it might still be the right call. And our feats at level 4, we have Distracting Spell Strike. This is 2 actions. You must have Spell Strike charged and a hand free. So one-handed weapon and then hand free. Use Spell Strike, but just after you make a feint against that target. And this is always the base version of feint. The way this works is you're choosing a spell to cast, right? You're casting the spell into the weapon, then you're feinting against your target, then you're striking. If you're in Arcane Cascade, you get a bonus to the deception check for this equal to your Arcane Cascade damage bonus, which by the time you're getting this, you're only level 4, so it's a +1 right now. It eventually go up to a +2. I honestly don't like this feat because it pushes you to lean more into a skill that you just don't have the right attribute support for. This is similar to the issue I had with Aloof Firmament and needing more strength, but still having to do like a dex build. In this case, we need charisma, and charisma just doesn't fit onto a magus that well, right? You need either strength or dex, you need int, you need some con so you can stay alive. Charisma just doesn't fit, and so you can lean into deception really hard for this, but you just don't have the attribute following it up, which does that make that a little bit harder. If they had said that you get to use your int instead of charisma for the deception checks, yeah, this would be amazing. Still, I don't think it's bad to have. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but you will have to lean into deception to really boost that up as much as you can. And at level 10, we have Dimensional Disappearance. When you use Dimensional Assault, you are affected by the invisibility spell. You can choose not to strike, because then your invisibility will just stick. But if you do strike, invisibility will go away. This is fantastic and has perfect synergy with the base passive in the subclass. It means that you can make any target that you can get to just off guard to you because you're invisible. They just don't have a choice, which is fantastic. Well, okay, if they, if they can see through it, right? See through invisibility or something, but that's rare. So don't worry too much about that. It makes your conflux spell nuts because keep in mind at this point it's your full speed. So it's your full speed and you're invisible. Yes, meaning you're always going to do the extra damage from, or the improved damage, I should say, from Arcane Cascade, which at this level's an extra 5. This is really cool. And you could just use it for survivability if you need to. You could use your one action, recharge a spell strike, go invisible, and then just go elsewhere. Because now you're safe and set up. You could just prep for next round, and that might be the right choice some of the time. It gives you so many options. This is a fantastic feat. This is a well designed, if fairly simple subclass. The one handed weapon restriction, just melee weapons, right, in one hand, is not a big deal thanks to Dimensional Assault and the extra damage from Arcane Cascade. All that works. You can be dex or strength, honestly, pretty easy here. I don't see a reason you have to go one way or the other. The off guard restriction for the extra damage isn't even that hard because you can flank with allies. And there's just so many things that make creatures off guard, allies knocking them prone, all sorts of stuff. It's not really that hard. You can pull it off. Dimensional Assault really pulls everything together here. And the level 10 feat is just kind of the icing on the cake here. If not for that pretty bad level 4 feat, which I really don't like, this would just be head and shoulders above the first two. Still, it's definitely better than both and is getting an A from me, but it's rough with that level 4 feat. That one really does let it down. Everything else here, though, pretty solid. Pretty happy with that ranking. That brings us to Resurgent Maelstrom. This combat style is all but improvised melee weapons. Your passive here is tons of bonuses to improvised weapons. First of all, you don't take the usual -2 penalty to your attack with it. You gain the water trait for improvised weapons as water flows over your hands while you wield them, which is something. Your improvised weapons are a minimum of 1d6 damage or 1d4 if you're giving it the agile trait. You gain the benefits from hand wraps of mighty blows and spells like runic weapon and stuff like that to your improvised weapons, which is also a huge help. If an improvised weapon is one-handed, it gains the backstabber trait, or you double the backstabber trait's damage if it already had backstabber. And if it's a two-handed improvised weapon, It's going to gain the Forceful trait, or you're going to treat the Forceful trait it already had as if you have one more weapons damage die, which is how it does its extra damage. So adding some more damage to those improvised weapons. While in Arcane Cascade, these improvised weapons get the versatile trait for the types of damage they don't normally do. So if you pick up a rock that does bludgeoning, now it's got versatile P and S. The passive bonuses are honestly they're basically necessary to make improvised weapons good at all here, but keep in mind there's still GM fiat involved. The backstabber and forceful traits really aren't necessary to make it feel good. They're a fine little bonus on top, but they're okay. The bonus for being in Arcane Cascade is weak. I mean, sometimes it comes up, but like, I don't know. I'm not looking at adding versatile S and P to a bludgeoning weapon being the reason I really needed to be an Arcane Cascade. So it's fine, but it's not great. It's not a great bonus. Conflict spell you get is Turbulent Tide. You have to be wielding an improvised weapon. Then you make a strike with it, and if it hits, the weapon breaks, and all creatures adjacent to you make a Fortitude save. And they're pushed 5 feet on a fail or 10 feet on a crit fail. You can stride following the creature that you actually struck as part of this. So they get pushed back 10 feet. You get to follow right along with them, but only the one you attacked. If the item has a hardness value higher than your level, or is an artifact, cursed item, or is difficult to break for some other specific reason, then it doesn't break, and therefore the enemies don't make the fort save. Keep in mind that whole thing I said about these specific types of items and all the requirements around them for them to be able to break. That's going to come up multiple times. Same restrictions. I'm not going to repeat it every time. So I'm not going to focus much on the items that can't break because talk to your GM, make sure you're not using one that can't break and trying to do this. That would feel terrible. If you just attempt to push back the target, that probably isn't great. Like, that's fine, but it will create separation between you. But then you can just follow it up. So it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But then this really didn't do a whole lot. And then you've got the fact that it's a fort save anyway. So if there are multiple creatures around and you're striking one to hopefully push them all back, a lot of creatures can handle that fort save. So it's not ideal in that way. At most, you're probably pushing, one other creature away. So I don't know. Doing all that just to break your weapon when you then have to get a new weapon and pick it up or grab it somehow. I, I struggle with that because I feel like that's more restrictive than it needs to be, and more painful to deal with than the bonuses you're getting here. Your studious spells at level 7, you get Water Walk, which we talked about. 11, you get Aqua's Orb, and 13, you get Unfettered Movement. Fortunately, Aqua's Orb, I don't think is good at all, but Unfettered Movement is a pretty solid spell, so yeah, I'm happy to see that in here. Honestly, that's definitely something I'd think about taking anyway. At level 4, we get Shattering Spell Strike. This is 2 actions. You have to have Spell Strike charged, be in Arcane Cascade, and wielding an improvised weapon. Use Spell Strike, and on hit, you're going to deal 2d6 force damage, as well as everything else you're normally doing with Spell Strike, as you break the improvised weapon. You add the rank of the spell slot used, if you used a spell slot spell, to this force damage as well. If the item has a hardness value, blah, 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 this doesn't break, you don't do the extra damage. At level 4, when you get this, it can be a lot of damage, right? 2d6 plus 4 if you're strength based. At this point, on top of whatever other damage you're doing with a spell strike, yeah, that feels pretty good, right? That's on top of everything else going on here. And I don't know. I feel like you can really hit pretty hard for this, right? Like you might be coming out with just a cantrip with an average damage of something like 20, 25 damage, which is really cool. But again, you're going to lose your weapon. So that extra damage is having to make up for the loss of weapon, and now you're going to have to use an action to get a new one. One thing worth considering is that some people will struggle to decide whether to use control or damage spells with their spell strikes. In this case, you've got extra damage anyway, so it makes it feel good if you're going to just use a control spell. Though I suppose you could just Nova harder and hit with damage. Do keep in mind that 2d6 damage never increases. So you're stuck with just that 2d6 added on top. At level 6, we have Surface Tension. This is one action. You're wielding a broken weapon now. Broken is ignore. The weapon deals an additional bludgeoning damage equal to the number of weapon damage die. This gains the deadly D8 trait or increases the size if already deadly 2d8 or goes up 1 if it's already d8. Anyway, messing with the deadly trait here. The first time that you spell strike or crit with a strike with the weapon, though, it is completely destroyed. If the item has a hardness value, blah, 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 then this doesn't work. So this is trying to help make up the fact that you have so much stuff that breaks your weapons, right? Let you keep it around. And I do like that. I think for an action, being able to keep a weapon going, nice. But the fact that it's going to destroy it pretty quickly anyway on a spell strike means, okay, you got a little more out of it, but you choose one action to keep it going, but you add some more traits onto it, even though one action you could have picked up another one. It's a give take, but you are adding some bonuses on there. So I don't mind it. I think it's nice. What lets it down, though, of course, is you have to spend an action to do it. If when you broke it, you could spend a reaction to do this, I would feel like that would be awesome. But as it is, it's okay. Level 8, we get Whirlpool's Pull. This is one action. You grab an unattended object that can be used as an improvised weapon within 15 feet, then use one action cantrip or conflux spell right after that. So it's all for one action. So you're really just kind of rolling it in. And honestly, this is a necessary feat. Being able to grab a weapon from range and then use a conflux spell or a cantrip all for that one action. Yeah. Yeah, that's a strong combo. I don't think you have the best conflux spell, but this certainly helps make it feel a lot better. It matters that this doesn't have the manipulate trait, by the way, so it won't trigger reactive strikes on its own. Instead, you're just, Luke Skywalkering that, well, it wouldn't be a lightsaber, but it'd be something more, you know, mundane to strike somebody with. And finally, at level 10, we have Maelstrom Flow. This is one action. You have to be wielding an improvised weapon, and this is once per hour. For 1 minute, your improvised weapon gains either the Astral, Corrosive, Extending, or Frost Rune, and then at the end of that 1 minute, it's destroyed. If it's in that whole non-breakable group thing we talked about, then it's only going to gain the rune you choose until the end of your turn. So you will get a bonus from it, but very little. This doesn't affect the number of property runes you can have. So you've got a full set of property runes going on. This isn't replacing one, it's just adding on top of. And this doesn't really fit anything else we've seen. To get the value from this, you need to use the same improvised weapon for the entire minute. And I suppose if you do break it, then you can use one action to keep it going. So you can keep using this improvised weapon that you've put effort into. But then if you crit with it or spell strike again, then it's gone. It's cool that you're adding another rune on top of all your runes, but I just don't think it works very well with this subclass. We have a pretty cohesive set of benefits. Even the feats, that all fits together mostly. And there's a couple decent spells. The big problem sitting underneath all of this is that improvised weapons are just difficult to work with because you're breaking them and needing to get new ones. And this is forcing extra actions onto a class that struggles because they have too much they want to do with too few actions. It's entirely possible to enter combat wielding two one-handed improvised weapons and give you more time to be able to use those before you have to get another one out. That's something that could certainly help you out. Whether your GM would let you do that or not, I don't know. Maybe if you grab them from right outside the door, but if you're carrying them with you, they're not really improvised. It really depends. There's a lot of GM fiat here, and there's just a lot of challenges with how it all comes together. I really want to like this because I want improvised weapons to work. And if you're going to use improvised weapons in the game, this might be the way to do it. And it's still for me a C here. I think that if this got updated, there's a chance they could make it A tier. I think the pieces exist to be A tier. They just need to come together with a better underlying way of using improvised weapons. All right, next up is Sparkling Targ. This is for melee with a shield, or the shield spell. We'll get there. Passives, you get the shield block feat. It's helpful. While in Arcane Cascade, when you have a shield raised, the bonus to AC that it would provide applies to saves from spells and magical effects as well. Damage from spells and magical effects can actually trigger your shield block, so you can block that damage. When blocking those, you get to add the resistance bonus from your AC that you would add to the shield's hardness. So you're really reducing some of that spell damage and just magical damage incoming. This also works for shield, the shield spell, or raise a tome, which is a feat you can get early on. So it works for anything that basically acts as a shield for you. Getting shield block is nice. It's a good thing to pick up anyway. If you're going to ever use a shield, you're going to want it as a general feat, but it's nice to have. Good survivability. The much larger boost, though, is adding that +1 or +2, depending on the AC of whatever you're using, to saves against spells and magical effects. Keep in mind that the bonus isn't just to a damage spell and effects, but all spells and magical effects. You become so much harder to take over with spells that go after your mind, right? Trying to control you. Those matter way more than the damage ones. Yes, you can't like reduce the damage of some sort of mind control type spell, but your will saves getting a +1 or +2 added to them is huge. That's something you definitely care about. Being able to block magical damage is also nice though. So you've got Dragon Breath coming in, magical damage, boom, block, reduce damage. That's great. For your survivability, it's fantastic. And finally, of course, this working with a shield spell means you could potentially use just a two-handed melee weapon and use the shield spell and get the full benefits. Not saying that's what you should do. And if you do shield block with the shield spell, remember it's something you can't cast again for 10 minutes, but it's still really strong. Your conflict spell is Shielding Strike. This either you're going to raise your shield or cast the shield spell, then melee strike. That's it. Pretty simple. Action compression, and you always want to raise your shield anyway. This just allows you to move, strike, raise shield, and recharge spell strike, and still have an action left. That's actually a lot to do in one turn. That last action, maybe it's how you go into Arcane Cascade. I don't know. Your Studia spells. Level 7, you get Resist Energy. 11 is Warding Aggression. And level 13 is Mountain Resilience. I like all of these. I know not everybody likes Warding Aggression, but I certainly do, especially on a build like this. As for Resist Energy and Mountain Resilience, they have great upcasting, especially Resist Energy, which can eventually provide the whole party with fantastic resistance. So you're going up against a dragon again, boom, party, I've got it just ready to go for you. Then the feats at level 4, we have Emergency Targ. This is a reaction. When an enemy hits you with a strike or a spell, or you fail against a spell save, you get to raise your shield. You have to have a shield equipped or the shield spell ready to cast, but you just get to raise it and you apply the AC bonus to your saves or your AC, which is great. We see similar feats elsewhere in the game. It's just useful reaction. Yes, it's fighting with other reactions, but if you weren't able to raise your shield during your turn, this gives you a good way to handle it. I would definitely take this, given all the bonuses we get for raising a shield. And finally, level 10, we've got Dazzling Block. This is a free action. When you use Shield Block, you get to use this. You're going to create a 15-foot cone of light. All creatures make a fortitude save that are in that area. Critical success, nothing happens. On a success, the creature is dazzled for 1 round. On a fail, they are blinded 1 round and dazzled for a minute, but they can interact to remove the blindness. And on a crit fail, they're blinded for a round and dazzled for an hour, and no rubbing away the blind. They're just stuck with it. This is a cool bonus to have on top of Shield Block. Even if you only get to Shield Block maybe twice in a combat, adding in effects that potentially affect multiple enemies is solid for 0 actions. Do be careful that it does hit allies as well. But if you can aim this in a direction of your choosing, I would think, because it doesn't have any stipulation, then that shouldn't really be that hard. And again, this works with real shields or the shield spell. And yeah, that's a bonus. This all comes together really nicely. It is the hyper defensive version of the class, but in a class that's generally very strong offensively anyway. So this just makes you more well rounded. And you do have the option to use whatever weapon you want, though it has to be melee, but still, any weapon in that category you can use. If you want to lean into the shield spell, then take Psychic maybe as a multiclass archetype and take the buff version of the shield spell, which, if you spend a focus point on it when you cast it, sticks around for multiple blocks before being destroyed. Honestly, with all the flexibility and everything lining up really well, they all play well together. They make you more defensive, but also give you a little bit of control later on. It all plays together to, in my opinion, just give you an S. It's exactly what it needs to be, and it's more flexible than anything we've really seen so far. All right, that brings us to Starlit Span. This is for ranged fighters, bows, thrown weapons, unarmed, gun, whatever. The passive is you can spell strike with a ranged weapon or ranged unarmed strike. Has to be within the first range increment, though, for the given weapon. While in Arcane Cascade, your ranged attacks ignore lesser cover that your allies give to your target. So this opens up a whole new type of spell strike because otherwise spell strike has to be melee. That alone is massive. Right? You don't need much more than that to feel like this is a huge change for you. Ignoring lesser cover from allies is a solid bonus, but nothing that redefines the way that you play. It's not crazy. So if you're not in Arcane Cascade, you're probably not that stressed out about it. Do keep in mind that adding damage from Arcane Cascade only applies to melee strikes, and this doesn't change that. This never said that the damage from Arcane Cascade also applies to ranged strikes. So, as far as I can tell, it doesn't. Your conflict spell is Shooting Star. You have to be wielding a ranged or thrown weapon. You're going to make a strike ignoring concealment and reducing cover by 1 degree for the strike alone. So, from greater to lesser cover, things like that. If it hits, then a meteor trail hangs in the air, giving the same ignoring of concealment and cover bonuses to any strike made against that creature by anybody until the start of your next turn. So we actually have a support benefit, right? We don't really get those. This is actually helping your allies attack that creature. And ignoring concealment is great. It's not the strongest thing ever, but it's going to feel good. It is a little sad that there will be many, even the majority of times, where this one action is just a focus spell to recharge while striking because there aren't any enemies behind cover or concealed, and that part just gets ignored. It's fine, but a lot of the time you're going to feel like, oh, I spent that one action to just strike and recharge. Again, at least you're recharging your spell strike, so it feels worth it. Your studious spells, you have Telekinetic Maneuver at level 7. Level 11, you get Wall of Wind. And level 13, you get Unfettered Movement. So we've talked about Unfettered Movement and Wall of Wind. Both good to have. So there's that. Not upset about the spells. Telekinetic Maneuver is decent. And it can be an okay choice with Spell Strike. Because striking and tripping is a good combo, which you can do from range. Because of who you are, right? But I probably would. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would ever actually do that. I would. It's not something you would ever heighten, and you probably have way better choices. So I think it's a little weak, honestly. By the time you get it at level 2, it's not actually a bad choice. Your feats at level 4, we have Starlit Eyes. This reduces the check you have to make to target concealed creatures from 5 to 4, and then from for hidden enemies from 11 to 10. Right, normally DC 11, then down to a DC 10. If you're an Arcane Cascade, instead that's a DC 3 and a DC 9 check, which are DC 3 is really low. When using Shooting Star, your focus spell you got at level 1, there's no need to roll a flat check against a hidden creature at all. You just don't even have to do it. You just get to target them. So yeah, this is a good passive buff that doesn't require Arcane Cascade. The big boost here is to your conflict spell, but it's to all strikes, helping you out. It's just one of those things that again depends on how much you're running into hidden and concealed creatures. It's a nice buff, and I'm not upset to have it, but they're not so strong that I think that it's necessary either. The real big boost here is Shooting Star, not having to do a targeting check against hidden creatures. Other than that, slightly reduced penalties for targeting. Sometimes they matter. And finally, level 10, Meteoric Spell Strike. This is 2 action, just wielding a ranged weapon on unarmed strike or thrown, whatever. Then you're going to Spell Strike, and it's going to be against a creature in the first range increment of that weapon or unarmed strike, whatever. You cannot use a cantrip for this or a focus spell. It has to be a spell slot spell. Each creature in the line between you and the target, but not including you or the target, takes damage equal to twice the rank of the spell slot used for Spell Strike. Not only that, it uses the damage type of that spell, which does imply it has to be a damage spell. It's very specifically written like that. And yeah, this is a little underwhelming for level 10 feet. Lines are hard to get a lot out of. So, yes, this could be a 120-foot line, depending on the weapon you're using, or it could be a 20-foot long line, depending on your choice. Even if we manage to get, like, let's say 3 enemies in the line, okay, we're adding some decent damage in here, right? Because you're dealing damage equal to twice the spell rank, so you're dealing 30 damage if it's that kind of perfect situation. And that is 100% the best case scenario, but more likely you're going to get like one creature in between the two of you because you have to line up you and the enemy you want to shoot with enemies in between. That's going to be pretty hard. And then we have the fact that there's kind of a hidden debuff in this feat, right? It only works with damage spells. Now, there are spells out there that do damage and have control, and it'll work with those. But it has to do damage because you have to deal a type of damage that's the same as the type of the spell. So you can't just use straight control spells with this. And I hate that it reduces you down like that. So that definitely hurts this feat. The fact is, this opens up a completely new way to spell strike. And I'm not going to ignore that. The features and feats, they try to ensure that you can reliably strike, and that's good. But I can't pretend it's like blowing me away, some of the feats and what they offer, or some of the passives and whatnot. You could ignore the feats completely, and it would almost feel entirely the same. You could never get value from the focus spell, honestly, in an entire campaign if things just aren't concealed and whatnot. But I'm still giving it a B because it's a great way to open up ranged spell strikes, and ranged spell strikes open up a different kind of play. They can affect the battlefield in a completely different way, and I think that deserves a B pretty much on its own, even though you may not get a whole lot out of the rest of this, which is weird. Okay, that brings us to Twisting Tree. Passive here, you get to do damage with staves differently than usual. So when you've got a staff in one hand, it has the Agile trait and does a d6 of damage. And when you're wielding in two hands, it's a d8 like it normally is, but you add the parry, reach, and trip traits. When you're in Arcane Cascade, then once per round you can use a free action to change between one-handed and two-handed. This allows for fighting with magical staves, which are already really useful to a caster, granting more spells per day. Normally, this is not an item that you're just going to successfully attack with, so this really makes it a very different style of play for you. The D6 Agile version is fine, but I really like having Reach, Trip, and Parry on the two-handed version. I think that's really solid. Yeah, I mean, being able to Reach, Trip is pretty good all on its own. Just Reach attacking is nice. Switch and Grip as a free action in a fight is fine, and I would expect that you probably wouldn't do it a ton, but at least the option's there if you need it. Your conflict spell is Spinning Staff. You have to be wielding a staff, and then you're going to strike two different creatures, one after another, using multiple attack penalty as it normally happens. Two strikes for one action, and recharging that's just good action economy. Means you can spend your other actions moving around or casting another spell or something. It's simple, like we had with Shielding Strike, and I consider that a plus. Simple is usually good. This does have one major flaw, though. It has to be two different creatures. Not only is that usually worse because focusing down a target is just smarter, it means that you have to be in reach of two enemies, which honestly you probably don't want to be. At least you might not be in full melee with them because you could use the reach side of your staff, right? Two-handed style and have a little distance. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how often you're going to want to be within range of two enemies. All right, Studious Spells. We've got Oaken Resilience at level 7, Slow at 11, and Flicker at 13. Oaken Resilience and Flicker, I'm just not a huge fan of, especially Flicker because it's uncontrollable where you end up at the end of that spell. Slow, though, alongside Spell Strike, when it's cast at rank 6, which you won't have at 11, but you'll have at level 13, which is fine. You can target 10 creatures within 30 feet. And even if you get one or two to fail and like two succeed, you're going to feel pretty good about it. It was worth the time. Your feats at level 4, we have Student of the Staff. On a crit with the staff, you're going to use your crit specialization from the club group, which gives you a push of 10 feet on a crit, which is cool. Spells from Spell Strike still work, so you're pushing them away, and then the spell still goes off and hits them, which is nice. When an Arcane Cascade, your staff gains the Deadly D6 trait, and it does the same type of damage your Arcane Cascade would do. Also, you can put property runes on magical staves, but not the shifting rune, just that one. Anyway, but what you do is you put the runes in your spell book, and then you from the spell book put them on your staff. It's fine. It's a process, but it's fine. This is a really solid set of bonuses. Pushing on A crit is problematic for some classes, but honestly, if you've already gotten your big hit out there, you're probably fine with it. Especially if you're spell striking with it, who cares? They can be as far away from you as they need to be. The deadly D6 trait, it's fine. It's free damage. It's nothing to write home about. What you're really here for is the ability to add property runes to your magical staff. Sure, it would have been good to have this at level 3. I say level 3 because third level is like the first level that magical staffs are actually available. But the chance of you even having magic staff by level 4 is pretty slim. But at least now, if you take this, you can make them as good as normal weapon would be with potency and striking and all of that. Really critical to making the class work out. And at level 10, we have Lunging Spell Strike. This is 2 actions. You have to be wielding a staff. Spell Strike is ready to go. Then you're going to make a Spell Strike using a spell slot spell. You're going to increase the reach of the strike by 5 times the spell's rank. This is basically the second way to make a ranged spell strike. It's not truly a ranged spell strike, but boy, it sure feels like it. By this level, by the level you get this feat, if you use your highest rank slot for spell strike, then you've got an additional 25 feet reach on top of maybe already using it as a reach weapon. That's crazy length. You can just entirely stay out of harm's way, hit somebody across the map, hit somebody in the air, really importantly. So yeah, this is a fantastic feat that I would take at level 10 without question. This is another really strong option. We've got staves in this context are just a solid melee weapon for you. You can lean into dex or strength. I like that you've got the options. Yes, you're going to have fewer options, but you do get nice traits added. But the big win is that you can fight with a magical staff that you wield as a spellcaster, giving you more spells anyway. You can, of course, get more staves over time. It doesn't just have to be the one. I do hate they have to take a feat to apply runes. Just takes up your level 4 feat, but you're definitely taking it. But it's still good. Like, you want the level 4 feat, and you aren't forced on it. But if you want to use magical staves, you pretty much are. Level 10 is just fantastic, though. The Conflict spell and 2 of the added spells are a little bit weak, so they do detract, and they do drop this out from S level. They're going to leave us at a solid A, though. And yeah, I really like this. I'm glad that it played together because stabs are another thing that could have fallen off kind of like the improvised weapons did. Instead, they stayed nice and solid. All right, time to get into dual wielding with Twofold Tine. In Arcane Cascade, if you strike with a weapon in one hand, you give the weapon in your other hand a bonus to your from Arcane Cascade that's boosted. So instead of 1, 2, 3, it'll be 2, 4, 6 until the end of your turn. Yeah, this is weak. It is double the damage from the Arcane Cascade bonus, but only on the second strike, which has a reduced chance to hit anyway, thanks to multiple attack penalty. Also, it's just 1 additional damage from 1 to 6, levels 1 to 6, on a second strike. That's terrible. Your Conflict spell. You have Force Fling. You have to be wielding 2 melee weapons, 1 in each hand, or 1 and then have a hand free. That's fine too. You make a strike, but it can be anywhere within 15 feet of you. Any physical damage you would do turns into force damage, and you have reduced multiple attack penalty if this isn't your first strike on this turn, and against a creature you haven't yet attacked, to -4 or -3 with Agile, or -8 or -6 with Agile. The 15-foot range, solid boost on your attack, allowing you to strike somebody either from safety or somebody in the air or something. That's great. Means you could attack this way, still be safe, and then use the other 2 actions to, say, cast a 2-action spell, which I do like. I think that's great. The bonus is for using this as not your first strike on a turn. I mean, sure, they're fine, but I don't know. I don't know if you want to take the map penalties anyway. But yeah, I mean that it's there if you're gonna do it. Your studious spells. Level 7 Blur, level 11 Gravity Well, level 13 Unfettered Movement. I discussed Blur and Unfettered Movement already. Gravity Well is not great. But at least not to me. I don't it's yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't use it. At level 4, we have Recharging Flurry. This is 2 actions. You're going to wield 2 one-handed melee weapons. Make 1 strike with each weapon, then recharge your spell strike. Regardless of the outcome, you could miss both. It's fine. You still recharge. The strikes use multiple attack penalty as usual. If the second is at a target you haven't attacked this turn, then it has reduced penalty, like we said, from Arcane Cascade. Recharging spell strike for free is great. assuming you want to make 2 strikes in this round. If you're building a dual wielding character, I think it's very likely you're trying to make strikes with both weapons. So it's probably doing what you want to do anyway, but it's also trying to get you to do something you shouldn't want to do, which is striking 2 different enemies. Stop trying to make us do that. It is not as good unless you kill the first one to go after a second one. If the first one didn't die, you want to attack it again. I just don't understand. They keep trying to do this. Surely, though, we won't do it at level 10. Split Spell Strike. Oh dear. 2 actions. You have to be wielding 2 one-handed melee weapons in different hands. Spell Strike has to be charged. You're going to make a Spell Strike with a spell that can target 2 creatures, at least, or has an area trait. You're going to make the strike against 2 different creatures. So 1 strike against one creature, 1 against another, with different weapons. Multiple attack penalty, as usual, by the way, on these strikes. And you gain the passive that you get for Twofold Tine to the second strike, right? That extra little bonus of damage. And if you hit both of them, they both get hit with the spell you're spell striking with. This is basically just adding an extra strike to the general spell strike because you're probably already affecting multiple creatures because you probably took expansive spell strike and you're already doing that. You can't affect a creature twice in the same round with the same spell, so it's not like you're getting to affect it by, hitting the version with fireball, then the second with fireball, and they both take double fireball. It doesn't work like that. Creature can only be a creature can only be affected by the same spell once in the round. So it adds another strike, a strike that you're less likely to hit with. I guess it's stronger than base spell strike, but not by much, and it means you have to be within melee range of 2 enemies. Dual wielding is not the strongest combat style. So that's a starting point. Stronger than improvised weapons, probably, but that's about it. The issue I have with many of the feats and features is that they really drive you to attack 2 different creatures in the same round. And unless the first one dies, that is not a good choice. It's just weaker than trying to take a single creature out. So the feats aren't amazing, the passives aren't amazing, your spells aren't amazing, but it still is cohesive enough. You are still a better dual wielder than if you didn't have this. This is still boosting your dual wielding capabilities. And some of these feats are really solid for certain aspects of the feat, but this is a C. There's no way it's not going to be a C after this. It's not a D, it's not terrible, right? But honestly, we're sitting around the same place we had with our improvised weapons. Getting close. All right. Unfurling Brocade. Combat style is Bladed Scarf. Okay. Realistically, the combat style is Wire Fu, but using your garments to attack with. We've all seen this, right? This is definitely a thing. But yes, what you're actually doing is you're wielding your fabric like it's a bladed scarf. Bladed scarf is a 2-handed weapon. It does 1d6 slashing damage. It's martial. It's in the flail group. Has disarm, finesse, reach, sweep, and trip traits. A ton of traits. You can use your version in 1 or 2 hands, but if it's one-handed, then it's a d4 damage instead of a d6. You can apply runes via hand wraps and mighty blows to this as well. So that's all the basic passives. While in Arcane Cascade, if you critically succeed at a disarm, keep in mind that was one of our traits on here, you can spend 1 action after the disarm to flick the weapon into your space rather than their space. On a crit success, it falls out of their hand. The fabric itself, again in Arcane Cascade, gains the grapple trait, and if you succeed at a grapple, you can use 1 action afterward to pull the enemy within 5 feet, or 5 feet towards you, I should say, because you had reach on it. And finally, if attempting to trip with the fabric, the creature can be up to 2 sizes larger than you. There's a lot going on here, but let's start things off. The Bladed Scarf is not an amazing weapon. It has some solid traits, but the damage is low, and it's really terrible if in 1 hand. But again, if you're leaning into the traits are good. The fact that you can gain hand wraps mighty blows bonuses toward it is necessary, since it's not actually a Bladed Scarf, it's your garments. So that had to be here, or the whole thing falls apart. You can't even do this. The Arcane Cascade bonuses are strange. Disarm only forces a drop again on crit success. So it's unlikely you're going to get much out of that, because how often are you going to disarm in the first place? Then crit succeed. Disarm is not good. Don't lean into disarm for athletics. You've got better choices. The grapple trait is cool. Using it with a weapon that has reach, why are you pulling them in range of you? Isn't the point of having reach so they're not in range of you? That's just a weird choice. Finally, The trip bonus is solid if you don't have Titan Wrestler, but if you plan to use all these athletics actions, you're taking Titan Wrestler anyway, because you wanted to grapple and trip and stuff. So, of course, you're going to take Titan Wrestler. So, it's probably wasted pretty quickly. That'll bring us to our Conflux spell, which is Home Among Mulberry Leaves. You have to be wielding your fabric. Then you can make a strike, and on hit, the target is immobilized until the start of your next turn. They can escape with an escape check against your spell save DC. On a crit success with the strike, you decide to add Clumsy One or Enfeebled One as well to the immobilized. This is a strike with a great rider. Adding immobilized on hit is already really good because most creatures will waste an action to increase their multiple attack penalty to try to escape. That's fantastic on its own. Then on a crit's just kind of cherry on top stuff by adding either clumsy or enfeebled. So pick whichever one's going to be worse for it. Yeah, I really like this conflux spell. Of course, it helps that you've got reach on your weapon. All comes together. This is pretty cool. Your studious spells are Web at level 7, Whirling Scarves at 11, and level 13 you get Planar Tether. Web it's a decent spell, but upcast to 4th rank, and yeah, it's way better. It's way better at 4th rank, and that's when you're going to get this. So yeah, I really like that. Whirling Scarves is cool because, as far as I know, it's not on the Arcane spell list. So I actually think you get one that's not on the Arcane list here, that's kind of fun. Um, but it's still, it's decent. It's okay. And Planar Tether is decent as well. So neither one's blowing my mind, but I don't mind having them, and I might pull them out here or there. Your feats at level 4, you've got Heaven Earth Encompassing Sleeves. It's a name. During daily prep, you can make sleeves of storage, letting you store things in there as part of your daily prep. The clothes hardness is increased to help people not destroy your clothes. I don't know if GMs are letting that happen anyway. This ends if you lose ownership of your clothing or someone else puts it on. Again, weird things. Items would then just fall to the nearest empty space. At ninth rank, these are greater sleeves of storage. Oh, it's fine. In most campaigns, I mean, you can do this if you want to sneak stuff past people. Boy, this is just the easiest pass. Just, there's no way I'm taking this. At level 10, we have Vermilion Threads. This is a reaction when you enter your Arcane Cascade. You can create a 15-foot burst of difficult terrain centered on you. You ignore difficult terrain and can walk across the threads yourself as if you could fly. So you're kind of hovering around on the threads, which is cool. This lasts for 1 minute or until you leave Arcane Cascade or if you leave the web. So keep in mind you have to stay on it. If you cast a spell from a spell slot while you're in the web, until the beginning of your next turn, any creature that ends movement in the web takes damage equal to the spell slot's rank with basic reflex save. No clue on the damage type because it doesn't say. Assume arcane. I don't know. This is something different, right? If you don't have reach on your weapon, it would seem really odd, but you do. So you can hit creatures that aren't all the way up to you. Like you can force them into difficult terrain to get to you, which is pretty cool. When you're casting a spell from a spell slot, well, guess what? You cast a spell from a spell slot when you use Spell Strike. So yeah, that all plays together pretty well. I would say I'd struggle with this if it wasn't a reaction, but the fact that this is a reaction when you use Arcane Cascade and it just looks kind of fun and cool, yeah, this is actually pretty good. I find this one to be kind of tough to rate. The weapon you're stuck with has a lot of traits and can fit with a strength build, because that's what makes the most of it with the athletics boosts. But you could find similar things with other weapons in other subclasses. Granted, not as many traits, but the ones you maybe care about more. The level 4 feat may as well just not exist. The level 10 is interesting, though. You have a really good conflux spell. You're not going to get a ton out of all the passives you're given. So I wrestled between a C or a B with this one because I feel like your conflux spell being good, a level 10 feat, that's pretty solid. Should bring you up to a B. Like, all right, great. We got things to work with here. But having a completely dead level 4 feat, having passives you probably won't get much out of, that hurt it a little bit, but I was still landing at a B. Like, but wait, you're stuck with the bladed scarf. That's it. That's all you have, the bladed scarf. and that dropped it to a C. So feel free to disagree with me if you think that I should have left it at a B. I get it, but I'm going to drop it to a C. I don't think this is where we needed to land. And finally, we have Volatile Spark. This is for firearms. Yes, we can use our guns here. Passive, you can spell strike from range with a firearm as long as it's within the first range increment. If the gun has the concussive trait, then when you use a spell strike and you strike with the weapon, you're going to use the weakest resistance of the target of your spell strike versus the spell's damage, piercing, or bludgeoning. This only applies to the target of the spell strike itself, not anybody who'd be hit by like the AoE damage of the spell. But at least you can target their weakness of the three. It's something. While in Arcane Cascade, oh wait, no, not while in Arcane Cascade. This is the one that deviates from that. Instead, you gain a special one action activity here called Reloading Cascade, where you enter Arcane Cascade and reload as one action. Nothing special while you're in it, this is just how you enter it. This is the only one that adds an action that lets you enter Arcane Cascade to do something else, but gives no passive benefit when in Arcane Cascade. The ability to spell strike from range, that's huge on its own. We talked about that. That changes entirely the way you use spell strike, and that alone is massive. The concussive trait thing is interesting. I like that, you may be striking something that doesn't have a weakness to fire, but you're doing a fire spell, and instead you can trigger its weakness to your bludgeoning damage. That's great, especially because, things like undead have a weakness to bludgeoning often. So, nice bonus on that. It won't come all the time. I'm not counting it for a lot, but it's there. The whole reload and enter arcane cascade action thing is great for action economy because you're reloading, which is hard, but you're only getting it one action per combat, right? Because you're only entering arcane cascade once. You have no reason to leave it. So, one free action per combat? I mean, it's not amazing. I don't love that. Also, keep in mind that the added damage in Arcane Cascade only applies to melee strikes. This is how I read it. So, see, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I swear this is how I read it. So, it doesn't add to your regular strikes with your weapon, meaning that entering Arcane Cascade is really just there to help reduce spell damage you take, which is by itself kind of weak. The conflict spell you get is Booming Blast. You have to be wielding a loaded firearm. Then you're going to make a strike. Then all enemies in a 20-foot emanation of you must succeed at a will save or become frightened 1 or 2 on a crit fail. And frightened is always good. This is a 20-foot emanation around you, though, and the Magus is using a gun. It is just enemies, which is fantastic, but hopefully there won't be that many because you're using a gun. So you shouldn't be within 20 feet of people. But you might be, and then frightened is good. There are, of course, firearms that do want you to be up close. So maybe this is the right time to pull out the orc shotgun that does D10 of damage and has a low range, and you just shotgun everybody. And actually, that feels really fitting now, and now I'm going to build that after this. Your studious spells. We have a level 7 Entangling Flora, level 11 Earthbind, and level 13 Seal Fate. I love Entangling Flora. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, rank to spell. Earthbind is just okay, and Seal Fate is bad. So you start strong and get weaker. Your feats. At level 4, we have Exploding Bullet. This is one action. You have to be wielding an unloaded firearm. You're going to reload it with a bullet made of fire or sonic magic. The shot gains the arcane trait and whichever of those two traits you take. Then the firearm gains the Scatter 5-foot trait, or adds 1 to the damage from Scatter if you already had Scatter on your weapon. The splash damage is going to match the bullet type. The bullet then disappears, though, if you don't use it for a shot before the end of your next turn. If your firearm is more than a reload 1, then every reload has to be used with Exploding Bullet. You can use this when using Reloading Cascade to reload it with this instead of a regular bullet. So adding in reloads that let you change your damage type, especially if it's something less common like Sonic, is really valuable, especially since it doesn't take any added resource and it's just free for you to do. That's cool. Adding or improving Scatter is nice, especially if you can trigger weaknesses. It's not a crazy bonus, but it's good, especially at range. I like Scatter from range more than I like Scatter but more than I like doing that kind of damage in melee. What I really like is that you can do this while you're reloading with Reloading Cascade as well, so it's in all your reload situations. Just a nice bonus. Can you get away without it? Yes, you could, but I would definitely take it. Finally, level 10, we have Kill Shots Report. This is a reaction when your spell strike downs an enemy, takes them to 0 hit points. Then you get to choose an enemy within 10 feet of that target, and it is affected by the spell from your spell strike. And use your spell strike attack roll if the spell has an attack roll. Otherwise, the second target gets to have a save just like it normally would. So initially, I felt like this was pushing you to spell strike with a damage spell, but that's not the case. You can just hit them with a really painful single target control spell, and if you take them out, because you're still hitting them with a gun that's going to hit pretty hard, especially if you crit, you can still just go to a second creature. Or you could just hit really hard with a damage spell that's a single target damage spell that's just ridiculous. And this could just try to take out a couple creatures. Honestly, either way, I think that's completely fine. I think you're good to use it either way, whichever one's more fun to you, and I think you'll be good with it. Keep in mind, you cannot affect the second creature with the same spell twice. So if it's an area thing, you can't just hit them again with the same spell in the same round. Firearms are a cool weapon group with a variety that you can, you know, get a lot of different traits out of. Keep in mind that there is a reload tax, and the reload tax is difficult on a Magus. The passives we get, they're fine. Conflux spell is also fine. It's not mind blowing because again, you shouldn't be around people, but it can be cool. I'd still use it regularly because even if you catch one creature in there and they get frightened, it was worth it. It's funny because usually things really stand out here. Like, hey, this is really good. This is really weak. Instead, everything here is fine. It's all just, it's good. It's not great. It's not bad. Except for some of the spells are bad. Everything else is just, yeah, it's fine. This feels like the most B rank B that I could have. And if you like firearms, this will work. And that's it. 10 hybrid studies ranked. We covered almost every rank across the board. And thankfully, nothing was unplayable. What do you think? Am I crazy to think improvised weapons are going to struggle? Is Sparkling Targ terrible and I'm just imagining things? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, adventure on.